It was funny because it was like Taylor, Ladine, Sebastian, and I all walking through the mud. So it's like, you got time to talk. And it wasn't like I could get away from them because it was just us three and they knew my secrets now of like riding in the grass. Um,
Sure.
so we were just chatting and Sebastian was like, "Oh, if you win Unbound, this will like change your life." The XL. I'm like, "No, it won't." I'm like a living proof. No, it won't. People are starting to realize that like even though they're getting these results and stuff, as soon as you don't get a result, no one gives and then people lose their
Yep.
identity and they just don't know where to go. There's other things to life besides biking. It's like it's just riding a bike.
100%.
you know?
Yep. What's going on, everybody? My name is JP, and I want to welcome you here to the Stable Cyclist Podcast, where we talk about bikes, life mentality, and when the occasion arises, we will deep dive on mental health. But right now it's May, which means we are also all in on the gravel gospel this month and meeting all kinds of important and influential people in the gravel world. We got things kicked off with Ben Delaney at the start of the month, and then it was Pete Stetna. We snuck in German Thomas Euler, and then we had Amanda Naumann Schick. And today we have Logan Kasper. I want to quickly mention that new product sponsors have come on board the past few weeks here at the Stable Cyclist, and they include Dawn to Dusk, Wahoo, Silka, but by far stepping to the absolute front of the line was Works Cycling Services, who came on board to sponsor the work I'm doing here and in the months to come. And if you are watching on YouTube, the Lauf Segle you can see behind me is because of their support. And this all went down at one of Works Cycling Services' amazing grassroots gravel events a few weeks ago. Granny's Gravel Grinder, did not disappoint. Chase Wark, who runs all of this, knows how to host these events. Yes, he is an aero dork. Yes, he is fast on the bike, but he is also an amazing event host, and he knows how to put on a big event and still keep it extremely grassroots. He also hosts the Hot Dish Gravel Race, the Day Across Minnesota, which you might have heard of called the Dam, and the Filthy 50 in the fall. And if you love gravel and you're looking for a wild adventure, head over to Works Cycling Services to learn more about all these races and start planning your trip to Minnesota. Now, some of you have been asking why all of these companies are all of a sudden supporting the Stable Cyclist, and it's pretty simple. For one, the podcast that you're watching or listening to has grown like crazy since we launched last year, and more support continues to come on board. But way more important than that, I am working on something extra special in the bike and mental health space. I am, of course, the producer of the Madahe film series, and the third film in the series, Back to the Start, is a film about how to restart your life after a serious mental health diagnosis. The film follows my journey from the Madahe 100 in 2019 through my bipolar diagnosis in 2020, and then trying to kind of realign and figure out what life was going to be like, and eventually getting back to the start line of this year's Madahe 100. And there is so much more in that story to share about, and if you are interested in learning more about the project, or you're interested in learning how to support it, there is a link in the description where you can go and check that out. And finally, the Stable Cyclist is also supported by Flow Formulas, and if you have a big event coming up or you're trying to train for just being healthy, then Flow Formulas is for you and should be in your bottles. And when you check out at flowformulas.com, you can use the code JohnPeter15 to get a discount on all those goodies in your cart. All right, my guest today is Logan Kasper. Logan is undoubtedly known for his victory in the 2023 Unbound XL. That was one of the crazy mud years, and he was also the runner-up in that race in 2024. But there is so much more to this man than just those results. We deep dive into identity. What happens when that race that you won doesn't change your life? Something longtime listeners will appreciate here on the Stable Cyclist, Logan also has some fantastic ideas of how to make sure that your riding stays fun. Let's get Logan into the studio. Well, Logan Kasper, welcome to the Stable Cyclist Podcast. We are doing a deep dive this month on gravel, and when I think of gravel and doing epic things on it, your name is near the top of the list of people we should talk to, especially for some unique perspective. But welcome, man. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. You are, I would call you like the most blue-collar professional or former professional, however you want to classify yourself, but you are like the most blue-collar cyclist I have seen in a long time. You live in a generational home of your families. You have a 9-to-5, and you have for quite a while. But we always start everything on the show just kind of with like some would call it like a zero to hero story. And then some would also call it like when did you start riding a bike until you realize like, I'm holding a pro license or I am a pro of some kind. So what does that story arc look like for you?
Yeah, so that was kind of like an interesting come up, I guess you could say. And my fiance and I were talking about it the other day. She's like, you kind of blaze your own trail versus how most people do like the Devo program and then this and that, or they go to Lees McRae and blah, blah, blah. And I was just kind of winging it the whole way. So it was nice because it put me on like a different perspective. But I started riding bikes when I was a teenager, just kind of, and I've mentioned that to other people before. It's like a rite of passage. It's like you either skateboard or you ride BMX bikes, and then everyone gets a car, and then that kind of like the people who are going to stick with it because it's transportation too. So I kind of stuck with it, and then I've always enjoyed hiking. So I was like, oh, I'll get a mountain bike because it's like hiking, but you can just go further. And then would putt around with that and have fun and ride like the local four-wheel and snowmobile trails, and then kind of one of my buddies, he was actually a teacher at the school I went to, was like, oh, you should try a race. You're like super fit and everything, which I didn't think I was, but he saw something that I didn't see. And so I just signed up and I absolutely like destroyed the race. It was like in the sport class, so whatever. But I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. And then I signed up for another one, same deal. So I was like, all right, it was at the end of the season. So I'm like, I'm going to buy a race bike next year. Bought like a used bike and was like, I'm gonna take a crack at this. And did, and like went from kind of the way like the sport to pro around us in New England. They had like different series, and it wasn't like Cat 5 to Cat 1. It was kind of like sport, expert, pro, open type of deal. So I jumped through those ranks super quick. But it was all kind of more or less like a hobby for a while because I worked full time. Like right out of high school, I was doing like work full time on my own. Had a career, and this was like on the side, and then I delved more into it. So in the course of like 3 years, I went from like sport to pro. Even though I wouldn't call myself a pro, it was like just because I'm racing at a professional level doesn't mean I'm living the pro life. And that gets back to like the blue collar thing. So it was like an accelerated, like, oh, I guess I'm good at this. I really enjoyed it. It was more of a hobby. But because I kind of took that background, it was interesting. It was like I had a career before I did all this. So it allowed me to like buy the bikes I wanted, not rely on sponsors or anything, just kind of blaze my own path, like have fun. And I wasn't targeting like points or anything. It was more or less like, oh, that race looks cool, I'm going to shoot for it. And I did. And that's how I met a lot of like cool people and everything like that, of like showing up and no one knows who I am. I've never shaved my legs before except for like a tattoo. But like it's the stereotypical like, who's this kid with the hairy legs, and like it just looks out of place, like totally, and then go and destroy the field, or at least like put a hurting on people that are kind of established there. And it was like, you don't know me, but you're gonna. So that's kind of just how I went through the ranks of it. And I still wouldn't say hero by any means, but like, that was just kind of the evolution of like a kid to dabbling, then like, fell into it. I guess I'm good at it. And it kind of became like a little more of a thing. Work was pretty accommodating, and then I just stuck with it. It was like let's see where I can go with this. I traveled a lot for work. I still do. So it was one of those like I've already been to these places. So I'd like bring
Sure.
my bike and like mess around a little bit. And so like I already knew the whole like, oh, if you're gonna travel for a race is easier than traveling for work. Like I just knew all the logistics, everything. It was weird. It was a weird angle to come in from. But yeah, that's how it
Yeah.
happened. It wasn't like anything special or like normal. It just happened.
Yeah, very organic. When you say home, let's kind of establish. Tell us where you're living, and then tell us about what you do for a living. You mentioned career a lot in there. What is it that you do?
Yeah, so my home currently right now, I'm in Baldwinville, Massachusetts. So it's directly south of New Hampshire because everyone says like Massachusetts is like Boston. It's like, it's a bigger state than that. It's not a huge state, don't get me wrong, but I'm kind of close to the New Hampshire side, and that's kind of how our town operates. We're in the woods. But yeah, I grew up here. It was my family's house. We moved here when I was like one. And then I was fortunate enough to buy the house for my parents and everything like that. So it's like now it's my little home. But yeah, went to a tech school for high school. It's kind of like a popular thing in our area, and took a shop called Industrial Technology, which was like a mix of everything. They're kind of changing around the name of it now because it was more broad, but now it's more like HVAC related. So I kind of honed in on that side of things, and I do industrial refrigeration. So for a couple of years, I was working for a commercial outfit doing a lot of like property management stuff. And then I went to this company, which a few friends worked at, and they're kind of like a powerhouse in the area. It's a company called Process Cooling, and as the name implies, like the industrial process, whether it's making tires, spray paint can, like you name it, the glasses you're wearing right now, I've seen them be made. So we make the equipment that cools off the machines that make whatever product you can possibly think of. So we travel all over the country and sometimes around the world. Not as much anymore. It's just not as lucrative, but it's a pretty demanding thing. And coming into that at like 20 years old, it's like it was good. Like I love the mechanical side of things, and I think that's why like biking's cool too because like everyone likes to tinker on a bike, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So it was like a easy for me like, and especially with the BMX thing, like oh I love tinkering. Working is tinkering all the time, and then it's just like kind of back and forth. So yeah, I've been doing that for too long. And I'm only 31. You know, but it's super demanding. Like I'm on call right now. I know we had that conversation. So like
Yep. Yep.
phone rings, this person, if they're making medical supplies, I got to go because they could be losing $1 million a day,
Yeah.
when that machine's down. So it's stressful. Then with like travel 2 weeks at a time. I was actually in Lawrence, Kansas, at the beginning of the year where the BWR Lawrence used to be. And, like driving down the street, I was like, brings back memories of like the sprint finish down here. So, um, yeah, working the bike. That's kind of how it goes.
Yeah. So, you get this career at a really young age, it sounds like, and you're kind of also like dabbling into the bike world. At, how freeing was it? Like you said, I kind of got to set my own schedule. Was it primarily mountain biking? And what did that look like? Like, where for racing were you traveling? And how were you determining that when you also had this job that kind of, at times, you said was accommodating, but I would guess kind of tied you down at the same time?
Yeah, yeah. So I would do mountain biking just because it was like all I really knew, and I didn't really have any interest in riding road. I had a road bike, but it was for just like stacking up miles, and it's like, as you know, the conditions aren't always conducive to riding a mountain bike. So it was like when it's crappy out, I'll just ride the road, or if it's super hot, it's just easier with the breeze. Blah blah blah. And our trail conditions, being in New England, change like insane all the time. So I just focused on mountain biking because I enjoyed it more, like getting out and stuff like that. And that was kind of like popular around us. We had the Route 66 series and the EFTA series that I kind of like dabbled in. And those were all the races of like, oh, they've been going for so long. So they kind of had like this mythical lore around them. So it felt cool to be part of that. And then every now and then another race would come up, or like the VT50 was a big one. So like I kept it really local to New England for a while and used it like stepping stones of like, yeah, you did that expert class. And then once I was doing really good at the pro class, I was like, all right, I need to step up just to progress like out of my spot here. And then I did like the NUE series, and that was kind of before gravel started like cracking off.
Yeah.
So it was like a steady progression. But with work, it was like, yep, I'm working Monday to Friday, like 40-hour weeks, no problem. And usually I was doing like 50 or 60-hour weeks because in our trade, like overtime, you can work as many hours as you want. There's no shortage of that. So at first, I didn't really plan with work around my racing schedule. I was just like, oh, all right, I got out of work at 8 o'clock at night. Tomorrow morning, I got to race and let's see what happens. Um, but then, like, as the racing got a little more serious, I was like, no, I can't work late tonight. But I would still do it. Or, like, classic of, like, get done Unbound. There's some funny stories of that. Literally drive to the airport, like, that night, sleep in the parking lot, hop on a flight the next morning, work the next day. Like, just because I don't know, I didn't necessarily have to. Maybe it was being young and dumb, but like I was kind of a slave to the trade of like, no, you just work. Like, there's no time off. I don't know. Or it's like, I like to separate work and like life. So I didn't want to burden work with my biking stuff, and I didn't want to burden biking with my work stuff. So I kind of always found that weird like balance. It wasn't always good, and it would fry me a lot because like I'd get home from work, go for a 3 hour like super hard ride, eat dinner. I'm like, all right. As soon as I hit the bed, get called out till like 2 in the morning. And I was like, all right. So all that riding you just did kind of just got scrapped, and then the ride for the next day, I would continue to train like nothing happened, but it would wear on me. Um, but just being able to like push it away and be like, all right, well tomorrow's a new day was always like something I pushed at. So like the work, they were accommodating with like a lot of travel and stuff later on, but in the beginning I never like asked either. So
Okay.
yeah.
Sure. So, it's one thing to be running that kind of hot schedule when you're training for XCO and the demands of the event are just different. But you're starting to, like you said, you're starting to get into NUE. I want to kind of hear the transition like from XCO to gravel. And like at some point in there, you had to kind of have a reckoning with like your lifestyle of like, how am I going to balance all this? Because you said I was balancing it, but not real well at times. So how did that transition happen, and how did you get to a point where you were still like being a healthy human?
Yeah. So that's an interesting one. So like I kind of always leaned more towards like I love the XCO stuff, but like in the New England area, it was almost like the 50-mile races were like the granddaddy races. Like, oh, this is where the really good guys race, and that was kind of like a little bit beyond the XCO stuff. And so I leaned into that, or like the 100-mile area races. And so that was a super easy transition into the NUE stuff, because I was already really good at those longer distance things. And I think it was because like I was used to working all day and then train at the end of the day. It was a good like, oh, you're fatigued when you do it. So it was like naturally good for me. So like XCO to the NUE was really easy transition, and it was kind of my first experience with like traveling and stuff too. So or traveling for racing, I should say.
Yeah.
So it like kind of gave me all the like, it set me up really well for gravel. And like I did the NUE series, I won it 1 year. I actually won it 1 year for the marathon series and the epic series. That was like before everyone was doing back-to-back races. I was like, hell, I'm here. The marathon's on Saturday, the epic race is on Sunday. Why don't I just do both? So I did that. And so I got first in both series. Actually, I tied for the epic series. But I was like, that's still pretty cool to race like back-to-back days and still be able to hold my own in the epics. So, and then like gravel just kind of like the mountain bike races are still happening and stuff, but that longer distance kind of leaned into gravel, and that's when it was coming out. So it's like I remember buying a gravel bike to train for those longer mountain bike races, and I was like, I should just do some gravel stuff too. And it started popping up more and more, and just, I wouldn't say like I was seeking it, but I just kind of like fell into it because it was really the distance and the time and stuff suited me well anyway. And like my mountain bike background was like, you got all these roadie guys. I'm sure you hear it a million times. You got all like these roadie guys trying gravel, and it's like, whoa, easy, but and no shade to them. But then at the same time, you got mountain bikers who have wicked skills but no power. I was kind of like in that middle ground, so it just suited me super well, and like a little more adventure behind it. It was that next like step up after the NUE series. It was like, all right, I've seen the NUE series, I've had fun with it. What's next? And that was kind of the next step. I didn't really have any interest in going like the US Cup for XCO stuff kind of sucks because it's not local to me at all. So it's like, do I really
Right.
want to fly to California all the time? And that's a conversation we can have later on about like the race scene on the East Coast is kind of like, and I'm sure up around you, it's kind of like, I really haven't heard of too much like big series around you. It's like either down south on the East Coast or in California, and there's really no
Yeah.
in between.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't say it like forced my hand into gravel, but it was just more accessible to go the gravel route after the NUE stuff.
100%. What was that first gravel bike that you had, and how I hate tire talk, but how skinny were the tires? Because I love hearing people talk about how like, oh, that was a road bike basically that we were riding on gravel initially. So when did you get into gravel?
So this is like the first official gravel bike I had was a Santa Cruz Stigmata, and I love that bike. I actually still have it. I gave it to my father-in-law because he was like, I think I want a gravel bike. I was like, this thing's sick, take it, and I
Yeah.
don't want to sell it to any, one of those deals. But the like OG one that I first started riding gravel on was a Salsa Fargo that I still have. I still commute with every day. And I remember ordering it, and I was so stoked of like, oh, it's gonna be in. So I went on like a 6 hour just base ride one day in the middle of the summer. It was so hot, and I was on my road bike, and I was like, well, my gravel bike's coming in. I'll take this gravel road on the way home. It just like paralleled the regular roads, and so I'm on this like not super racy road bike, but on this gravel road, and I was doing, I think, like 25, and I hit just brake bumps and went right over the bars, yard sale. I thought I broke my wrist, like blood all. You know, when it's so hot
Yep.
out, you take your gloves off because you just like, ah. But I totally cheese grated my hands, everything like that, because I was so excited to get the gravel bike that I was doing something that I shouldn't have been doing on my road bike. And that was when road bikes, we were all on 23s,
Yeah.
So not super long ago, but it's progressed pretty quick. So it's like I limped it home and like covered in blood, covered in sand. And when the sand gets in your hand, then it's like gritty too, and you're like, this sucks. So then like a week later, that Fargo came in, and I was like, sick. And it wasn't really a racing bike, but it was like, okay, I can ride off road in a drop bar position relatively quick. But that was before gravel was like even a thing. It was more or less like people just riding whatever bike they had. There wasn't, it was
Sure.
like cross bikes or, so it was
Yep.
like just to have that Fargo to be able to ride the trails. And a lot of the infrastructure around me is like snowmobile trail, four-wheeler trail. So it's not really, you don't need a mountain bike, but a road bike can't do it. And depending on the season,
Yeah.
so there's like endless rail trails, or I can leave from like my house and go up to Canada, all trails if I wanted.
Yeah.
So that was like, all right, my first introduction to it. And then the Stigmata was like, all right, we're gonna ride this fast. I need a real gravel bike. The Fargo's fast, it's cool, but like horses for courses type of thing. So, and
Yeah.
that was it came with 45s, and it was 45 Ramblers, and I loved them. That was like, I don't know, just because I didn't know better. Also, like no one really knew better at the time. But
Right.
I remember just bombing around, having a blast on it, and I would go to these races, and people were running like 33s and 36s. I remember the first BWR San Diego I went to, and I was on 45s, and everyone's like, "What are you doing?" And it was actually funny. Dylan and I were staying together, and they're like, "Nice tires." It was kind of one of those, and I did like pretty good, and just like held my own, held the speed and everything. I was like, wow, I thought on the road, I could kind of feel myself getting a little separated. But like anytime it turned off road, I'm like, what are these guys doing? And I was like, maybe it's
Yeah.
just because my mountain bike skills, but they were all on like 33s. And now look how the tides have changed of like 45. People are like, you're really going to run a 45, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Too
um,
skinny today.
yeah, exactly. So it was kind of like I've never really run lower than a 45 just because it's like that's what it came with. And I'm a bigger dude. So I like having a little more cushion. Since I'm a bigger dude, I can push a little more weight. Like I'm not a weight weenie at all. And everyone knows that about my bikes. They're just like, yeah, he runs what he brung and that's it, you know?
Yeah. So the transition you made into gravel time-wise, is that around the pandemic or did that happen before the pandemic?
That was around the pandemic. So like when I was doing
Okay.
the NUE stuff, that was like prime pandemic time because of and I was even doing like the epic ride series and stuff like that, and it was kind of a bummer because I was so primed up and in shape. It was, and I'm sure you remember, it was like everything's booked out through the year, you're like jazzed, and then a week before the race it's like never mind, okay, cancel that. So like
Yeah.
what I actually did was I would take the times that the races got canceled and I'd just go do my own adventure because it's like I'm peaking right now. So like one of my work buddies and I, he was supposed to come with me and be kind of my soigneur for one of the, I think it was the Epic Rides. Uh, what's the one in Arizona? I don't know, but the whiskey off road.
Yeah.
So that got
Yep.
canceled and it was like April, and we're like, why don't I just ride the whole coast of Maine up to Canada? So we started at like the New Hampshire border and I rode the whole coast up. And he just took my van and we slept at Walmart's. But it was like a sick 4 day adventure, putting like 200 miles a day on the road bike. It was kind of uncharted territory at the time, but it was like, dude, I'm so primed up and I'm not doing anything with it. So like I need to do
Yeah.
adventures. So it was like right around COVID time that I transitioned into gravel just because I think the mountain bike races were getting shut down and the gravel races were still kind of, I wouldn't say happening, but there was more of a chance of like a gravel race popping up. And maybe COVID was a reason why like gravel got so popular when it did. It kind of like, it gave people a lot more like chance to like spread out and everything, or I don't know what you want
Yeah.
to call it, but like it was just an easy transition over. So it wasn't like, oh, now I got to totally shift focus. It just like naturally shifted focus from like the mountain bike stuff because it wasn't happening to the gravel stuff that was happening a little more.
You mentioned that, you were doing these long rides up the coast of Maine and you're doing like 200 miles a day. How much of your desire to start moving into things like Unbound, which I think you did for the first time in 2021, how much was it just like realizing like, man, I'm doing 200 miles and I feel pretty good at the end of this and I think I can go race this?
Uh, yeah, that was like all, well, like that was the crazy thing in my eyes was it was never like, oh, how fast you can ride a 30-mile course. It was like, can you do 200 miles? And that was always the like, all right, well, if you can do 100, you can do 150, then you can do 200, and then you can do 250. So it was never like, it was a weird way of gauging like how good of a rider you are, but it was always more of like a race of attrition against myself of like just benchmark. So like that's what was alluring to it of like I can do 200 miles. Yeah, like it was never like, oh, I can do it this fast or like really nitty gritty. It was just kind of that evolution of like, and maybe that leans back to like the XCO stuff. It was like, well, the XCO stuff was 25 miles, and then the like epic stuff was around 50, and then I started branching into the 100. So it was like that stepping stone of like the gravel events were longer, so it just naturally made sense to go that way. And yeah, that's like I was comfortable at those distances anyway. And that was kind of before it was. I mean, it's always been cool to do that stuff, but like not a lot of people were putting like time and effort into going like really long bombs. So it was like just doing it to do it. There was no rhyme or reason behind it. There was like no clout behind it. But people were also like, well, this kid's just riding these long rides. It's like, yeah, anyone can do it. It's not that tough. I think that's what was interesting was like, it wasn't really racing. It was just going out for a long day on the bike and like ride till you break down, you know?
So you do Unbound twice. and then you sign up for the XL in 2023. And I normally do not park and get into the nitty-gritty of races on this podcast, but I do want to talk about 2023 because to me it's like the XL version of Unbound is maybe the most epic gravel race that has ever happened in America, at least. And it was gnarly. So tell us about you. And I've also heard you say a lot of times, like, you like a good party pace. And so, like, the really long distances to you are more fun because it's not crazy cutthroat. We're just riding at a hard pace and see who's still standing at the end. So take it away. Tell us all about Unbound 2023.
Yeah, so like you said, I did the 200 a couple of years in a row, and like the first one of that was like getting your feet wet, like what is this? And it was cool. And actually, one of my friends, Will, was gonna do the 200 too, and just kind of made like the game day decision, like I kind of want to do the 350. I don't think he liked like the horsepower behind it. He would have totally done good. And that was the year. I don't know if you know Will Lovner. He's the man, but like I kind of lived through him because he did it. He broke his wrist during it, still came in second, like epic story. But like I saw him do it and I was like, now that looks like a fun race. So then like 2022, whatever. But 2023, yeah, 2022 I was kind of like burnt out and I just went there to like ride it and have fun, support some friends. But then 2023, the mud year. So I went into it. I brought my mountain bike because like I kind of knew how the Unbound terrain was, and this was like before the drop bar mountain bike thing. I'm definitely not a trendsetter on that. People have been doing that since like the 2000s. Don't get me wrong. But like I'd been experimenting with it for a while, and I was like, this is the move. Like I figured out a way how to stuff a 42 tooth on the bike so I could keep up with that top end. Put drop bars on it, yada yada. And that was kind of like before gear was compatible, like because I'm a Shimano man. I think Shrimp sucks, but that's me. But so like that was before their like drop bar and mountain bike stuff really jived well together. So like it was that mechanic in me like tinkering a lot with the bike, being like, this bike actually rips. And I took like my gravel bike that I wasn't necessarily like too happy with at the time, and I rode it back to back with that mountain bike on like local snowmobile trails and stuff, and I was like, this thing is night and day faster. Like as much as you can have two different bikes and like test them back to back. So I was like spending days just like riding the same thing. And I was like, I'm gonna rock this and like screw it. It's such a long race. It's not gonna be super punchy. Like it will. And yeah, I was wrong. It was punchy. It was hard. But like I was just like, what do I got to lose? This is like, it just seemed like a no-brainer to bring this bike. It's like it's got plenty of mud clearance, and that was the thing too. Is everyone was caught off guard, like, oh, there's mud in Kansas. It's like if you did any research on that race, that wasn't new news, you know, like.
No. Yuri Huswald could tell you all about it from a few years earlier.
Exactly. Well, and so that was kind of the thing of like everyone was shocked, and it's like, did you do any research? Like, and I kind of laughed because I'm like, you guys are professionals here. Like, I'm just doing this on the side, and I figured it out. What do you mean? So, yeah, that year, like in the beginning, was super fast. That was like one of the first years that a lot of like real horsepower showed up, and there's always been horsepower there, don't get me wrong, but it was like one of the years that it really sharpened up. It was starting to kind of get in the groove, and I was like, oh, I chose an interesting year to break into this one. So out the gate it was like rip roaring for a while, and I really had fun with it because I just like to ride fast. But on like some of the fast stuff, like at the first gas station, it just blew up because there was really no etiquette in it, and that's something that's kind of, it changed this year, which I was super happy with. But just like, you got to kind of ask yourself, like, being a nice guy versus like a race result at those gas stations is kind of interesting. So I leaned on the side of like being a nice guy, and because of that, I got dropped out of the front group. It was like I left right after them, and I just didn't have the horsepower to chase back up. Like you could see him in the distance, and you're like, I can get him. Then 20 minutes later, you're like, I guess I can't, and you're kind of cracked. So And then I started having the second doubts of like, I was kind of in that no man's land. I think a lot of people found themselves in that of like, yeah, there's that front group of maybe like 8 guys, and then you're only 2 minutes back, but then there's another group that's also 5 minutes behind you. And it was just kind of like strung out. And I'm like, maybe this wasn't the bike to bring because it's just like a little slower. Obviously, those guys are cruising, yada, yada. But then as soon as it got muddy, everyone's wheels just came off. And I actually met up with a friend, Chris, who was doing the same thing, and he kind of got strung out, and we were riding together. And I was like, "Relax, we got all night. This is just the beginning of the race. Like the sun just went down. We'll catch them. Don't worry. They're riding way too hard." Because a lot of people in that front group too, that distance was new to them. So, or I shouldn't say new, but like I felt like I had a ton more experience with it, and I knew of like they're riding too hard, like that. I'm calling their bluff on this one, like or too surgy and stuff like that. And it's like that works good for a while, but then they also like at the first gas station, it was a hard tell of like what they grabbed. I'm like, bold move. That's not gonna like work
It's not
for
gonna
you.
get the job done.
Yeah, exactly. It's like it'll work in the short term, but this isn't gonna help you in 10 hours from now. So I was pretty confident of like, yeah, just race it. Don't worry about them. You'll catch them. And as soon as it got muddy, that's exactly what happened. Like, I just walked pretty much up to those guys. I was riding, but like at a pace of like you just see them like all exploding their gear or like getting bogged down in the mud. They'll clean out their drivetrain and do a full blown sprint for 20 feet, like plug their bike up and rinse and repeat. And meanwhile, I just rode in the grass next to them and was like, what are you guys doing? And that gets back to the like, maybe the blue collar guy in me of like, you guys are pros. What are you guys like? Just think outside the box of like typical bike racing. It's like just take care of your bike and nothing will go wrong. Like, I don't know why that was such like a crazy thought, but so then yeah, like as the night went on, it was kind of like chipping away people that way, and then I came up on the lead group and did that. Like just got by all of them, and they were all kind of walking together like a like the wind was out of their sails for sure.
Sure.
I actually remember looking at Ted King and I was like, we should have brought the fat bikes, Ted, because I've been bugging Ted to ride fat bikes for a while and still am. Hint, hint, Ted. But he's been like blowing me off of just like, oh yeah, whatever. I'm like, we should have brought the fat bikes. And the look in his face, you could tell it was like, all right, I just mentally cracked you. Good. Like, in I don't like hurting people or anything like that, but I do like you wanted to do a dick swinging contest. All right, we're doing it now. So that kind of gave me a little like confidence. And as soon as like I got in front of them, I was like, how come no one? They just saw what I did to get by them, and they weren't
Yeah.
doing it. And it was at night, fortunately, so I could see all their lights. And I just kept putting it in the distance until I couldn't see any lights anymore. And I was like, Mint, all right, well, I'm just going to double down. And I like goosed it because I was like, well, it's those however many guys versus one. If they work together and they were the crew of guys that would work together because they're all pretty sharp racers, I was like, they can catch me pretty easily. So I just kind of had to double down and go. And then, like, the next day, it got better as it went on. It was more rideable. But someone's like, yeah, second place is 20 miles behind. I'm like, really? Like, all right, well, I don't need to worry as much anymore. I didn't like ease up, but I was like, they're not in a group. Okay, that's good to know. And so, like, I kind of thought, I was like, there must have been some infighting or mechanicals or people had like a moment of weakness and bailed out. And that's what it seemed like a lot of like people ended up having that. Like, they just kind of downward spiral. Like, I think where like I said before, I was like, oh, relax, we'll make it happen. They couldn't get out of that groove. They were like, oh, I'm not in first place or second place. Like, pull the plug. So yeah, and then it was
How
just this.
how how much do you think your bike setup, uh, with having a suspension fork and all that, allowed you to kind of go in the places that you were able to go to get through all those sections, versus what at the time everybody else was riding? Because if I'm remembering right, like in 2023, at least the gravel suspension fork was like still maybe an idea in our heads. But yeah, like there's so much problem solving in what you just described, and I'm trying to piece it all together of like, where are all these gains that you got that you had set up that were totally you? Because most of them were.
Yeah, well, so like as you noted, suspension forks, like there was the Fox that just came out, and like Taylor was running it, and when we were riding together during the race, I was like, "Oh, how do you like that thing?" Because it was like so new, no one even had like feedback on it. He's like, "Oh, I like it," and it didn't have a remote lockout. Where I was running the mountain bike fork that I've been running since 2019. That was the same drivetrain since my first Unbound that I was on. So like I ended up machining a remote lockout, like the little thumb lever, up on top of the stem, so I could, or it was like on top of the aero bars. So when I was in the aero bars, I could actually lock out the fork. So when I got in the road, or like I was in the aero bars and I saw some bumpy stuff coming, I could just push it and stay in the aero bars and just like continue to go through. So, but that was a 100 mil fork also. So anytime it got chunky, I could just send it through it. Whereas everyone kind of had to tiptoe because flats are a thing at Unbound. So I was like,
Yeah.
kind of trying to mitigate issues of like, yeah, flats are going to be a problem. How about I set myself up with something that's not going to give me flats? Or like when it is chunky, like really set myself up. So like I was able to ride a lot of the grass sections that you totally could on a gravel bike. But it was way more comfortable on a mountain bike just because a lot of the grass too, you didn't know what was under it because it was 2 feet, 3 feet tall.
Yeah.
So you're kind of
Yeah.
just bushwhacking. And then there was times where it was like just brush and you had to get off and walk regardless because it was just brush on the side of the road, barbed wire, and then the mud in the middle. So it was like pick your poison. But what I would do is like I'd ride on the road until I started to see it clump up and then immediately went in the grass. And since the grass had dew on it, it would clean your bike off also. So it was one of those like, oh, this is helping me. So like I think a lot of people got their bikes in the mud and then like tried to pick it off with a stick, and it was like just push it in the grass. It's like little brushes cleaning your bike the whole
Yeah.
time. So, and then I was on 2.0 tires. So yeah, 2.0 tires, which is like the equivalent to like a 50 or
Yeah.
whatever. It's the Contis that everyone's racing now. So
Yeah. Yeah.
but like I didn't actually. I might have been on 2. Yeah, I was on 2.2s. So not the one everyone's racing now unless they can fit it, but it was a mountain bike, so I had tons of clearance, and a lot of the people there were like stuffing 47s in their bike that like if a blade of grass got in it, it would like lock up the
Yeah.
tire. So it was kind of
Yeah.
one of those like, what did you think was gonna happen? Especially like, have you ever ridden out there in Kansas?
I have not. No.
Okay, well
I'll
like
be there. I'll be there for the first time this year. So.
cool. Well, I'll bump into you. I got an interesting thing to talk about after that. But so like the mud isn't like the mud we're used to up north here. It kind of has
Sure.
like grit and rocks and stuff in it. So once you do get it, it's very abrasive and like rough on gear, as I'm sure you saw. Most people's frames are like worn through. But that was the thing of like, I didn't choose the bike for the clearance. I chose the bike for the tires. And like mountain bikes are way more comfortable than gravel over long distance. Well, back then they're starting to kind of lean around a little
Yeah.
bit.
Yep.
But like, yeah, I kind of picked all the gear that would best suit me for that race. Where I feel like a lot of people just pick gear that they were obligated to ride, and it's like, well, that might what I don't know. Like, if someone's paying me to ride a bike, which I wasn't being paid to ride, but like, wouldn't you like try to pick the bike that's gonna best suit you well? And that was like part of the reason why I rode that bike was like, yeah, I have this gravel bike, but you don't necessarily have just because everyone else is doing it, you don't have to do it. Like set yourself up for success. It was like people running super lightweight tires, and it's like you're gonna cut it. I don't care if it's fast on the road. Like horses, use the thing that makes the most sense, or the bike that gets you the most speed when everyone else is going slow, because that's where the big time gaps are made up. So, like in that fast stuff, like I said, I was having a hard time at that high speed because like I was limited to a 42 tooth chain ring and yada yada. But like when it did get slow, I had the bike that was way faster than everybody else.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and then that was kind of like on the nutrition side. I see you're pounding a flow bottle. That was before like everyone was into the whole gel mix thing too.
Yeah.
Like the year before that, I lost some support at a race we were supposed to have hand ups and it didn't happen. So I was like, well, I'm just gonna make a bottle full of gel, and I used like a whole bag of flow and made a bottle. And Dylan was like roasting me. He's like, dude, that thing's wild. And now everyone's doing it. Like
Yeah.
that's just the thing. So that was kind of it too. Was like no one knew how to fuel for it, and it was like, why don't you just think about what you need and kind of set yourself
Yep.
up for it? Which it seemed like a no brainer to me, but apparently everyone else kind of I don't know if it's like they just got to listen to the trends and it's like just think for yourself, you'll be good.
Yeah. 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 So I want to talk about the finish of 2023 because I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot of who you are as a human in this story and your response to everything. You won by almost 2 hours, if I have looked at the results correctly. And there was really nobody from the organization there to greet you when you won. Second place got the like champagne shower and all the social media attention. And by that point, you were just kind of a like, you know, leaning against a brick wall somewhere in Emporia, taking in the sights. So, and I've also heard you say, like, my favorite quote I've heard you say is, I want to get it correctly here, like, give it a week and nobody cares. And so, like, there's so much in there that I'm like, man, this could be like the culmination of your career. Also, it could be shattering that no one was there to really receive you. And yet you have this kind of paradigm of like, this, we're just having fun here, folks. So tell me all about that.
Yeah, well, so like I would have loved to ride in with the rest of the guys, and I don't know if you heard that too. Of like one of my biggest regrets is not going back out there and riding in with the second place because I really didn't like care to look at how the race was unfolding or check out track leaders or anything like that. Like I was totally unplugged during the whole race, so like no cell service, no nothing. So it was like, yeah, I just hung out at the finish and watched my friends in the 200 finish and everything like that. Gave them a hug as they came across the line, yada yada. But I felt like it was the respectful thing to do to like wait for second and third to come across. And it was like I was just munching and hanging out, like watching. It's like you're there for the race and everything like that. So that's why I was there, is just to like hang out and enjoy the moment. And that's what I did. Like I called my girlfriend at the time and like the people that were close to me in just like a short like hell yeah, sweet, like all right, and then just kind of like hung out. Got some food, probably not as much as I should have, but I was all like jacked up on caffeine and everything too, and like you just pounded food forever, so I wasn't really. I totally didn't do any good recovery things.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was like one of my biggest regrets was not like going a couple miles out of town and riding in with Luke because he's a super nice dude too, and like he deserved that. He deserved first place, but he also deserved the second that he got. So that would have been like cool, and then Uba would have been awesome to roll in with third too. Of just like at that point, it wasn't a race of like, oh, there's three guys battling it out. I thought of like, well, it wasn't like I was gonna screw with the race or anything. So it would have been nice to be like, oh, how was your night? Like, kick ass job, yada yada. But I just got lazy and kind of wrapped up and hanging out. So that's how that went. But yeah, I wasn't like mad that no one was there or anything like that at all. Because like we're just riding bikes, riding them fast. Like nobody cares. So yeah, I was, and that was like I came in the sprint finish this year, and that was something one of my friends and I talked about. I was like, I didn't care if I won this year because I've already won. I know what it feels like. I could come in 20th place and be just as happy. And he was like, that's kind of a cool perspective. And I'm like, yeah, like I got into racing because I like riding fast with people, not for like the like, oh, I won. Because like if you're chasing that, you're never going to be happy with it. But it's like, I like to kind of push myself and yada yada. So that was to me like, yep, finish the race, cool. Now like, just enjoy the little moment. But yeah, it didn't really like, I wouldn't say mean anything to me, but I wasn't like, do you know who I am? It's like,
Yeah.
yeah, whatever.
So, so yeah, I want to talk about this past year. You come back, and I think like deep down, was there still some of that, like, I kind of have something to prove here because I won in this biblically epic year of mud, and nobody really paid attention to me. Did it? I guess what I'm saying is, like, you finished second in this past year in a sprint finish. Did it mean something to just prove to yourself, like, yeah, I'm back at the front? Like, I didn't win, but I was here the whole time, and I've proven who I am.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it. Like, my coach and I talked right after the race about that of like, I always tell people, I'm like, I'm washed up. I'm not fast anymore, yada, yada. But like, that was a good reassuring of like, no, it wasn't just a fluke. It wasn't just the bike. It wasn't just the mud. It's like, no, I belong kind of in that spot, like in that rough area. And it's like, I don't necessarily think I belong winning all the time because I totally don't. Um, but at the same time, it's like, no, I can hang. That's just kind of what I wanted to prove was like, I can hang. I don't need any other um, like hype from anybody else. It's more or less just mentally, not mentally knowing, but like knowing for myself of like, yeah, you're where you belong. You're racing with the guys you belong to race with. And this year it was a lot more of a gentleman's race. And I don't think I had any part of that. But at the same time, it was kind of like one of those, like everyone was on the same page of like, let's not make this cutthroat. Let's keep the gas stations cool. It definitely worked out well. So in Sebastian, who won, totally deserved to win. Like he, I'm not the most tactical person. Like even though I think about a lot of oddball stuff, he totally like played me like a fiddle for that sprint. Like, uh, but a couple of miles out, I pulled up next to him and I was like, "What do you want to do here? Like, how do we want to finish this? Like, we've made it this far. It's been cool." And just out of like a mutual respect, like we gave each other dabs and it was like, let's just ride in together and then let's finish it like a real race. So we rode like side by side for probably the last 5 miles, like no draft and no trying to like edge up on a guy. And then as soon as we went under that little bridge thing and there's a hill, no one ever shows like the hill before the sprint finish, but that's soul
Yeah.
crushing. Um, I totally launched like a bomb up it and I gapped him by like 3 bike lengths and I was like sick. And then he had like a super good aero bar position. He was on a gravel bike, so a bike that was faster on the road. And I'm on my mountain bike and I'm like, oh, that was a mistake. So he was able to like bring it back in. And then I pretty much let him out a majority of the way. So I was like, well, I'll give it a crack. And I came around the corner and I just opened up the sprint a little too early. So he came around me and then just had more gearing than I did. And I did put it in my 10 tooth. And you know, when you're like stomping in your 10 tooth and it's covered in mud, so it like skips. It was
Yep.
just like every pedal stroke it was skipping. And I'm like, no. But it was one of those like, well, I shouldn't have attacked on that hill. I should have let him lead me out, yada, yada. But at the same time, I was like, no, he played it. It's a race. He played it good.
Yeah.
Like, that's totally cool. It was just nice to be there. And like at the end, gave him a hug. I was like, good job, man. Like,
Yeah.
stoked for you, you know? And then,
Yeah.
yeah, that was the thing is like, no matter who I was there with or anything like that or the result, it was like, that was fun. Like, yep,
Yeah.
this is cool.
Yeah. You had kind of proven to yourself your performance the year before was legit. Did you kind of feel at the time like I might be getting ready to step away from doing this kind of stuff? Because I've read in some of the things we'll talk about next where you're like, well, this is kind of the end of what I'm doing, at least on this to this scale. Was there some of that, or did that come later?
Yeah, no, I totally went into that race with this is like my last big race. Like
Okay.
that. And I was even talking to the guys. It was funny because it was like Taylor, Ladine, Sebastian, and I all walking through the mud. So it's like, you got time to talk. And it wasn't like I could get away from them because it was just us three and they knew my secrets now of like riding in the grass. Um,
Sure.
so we were just chatting and Sebastian was like, oh, if you win Unbound, this will like change your life. The XL. I'm like, no, it won't. I'm like a living proof. No, it won't. So I kind of had to laugh at that, but I was telling them, I was like, this is my last like big race. And it was like under the moonlight. It was kind of peaceful. So I was just like, this is my last big race because like I've been seeing it a lot with other people, and maybe it's easier for me because I had a career before, but like people are starting to realize that like even though they're getting these results and stuff, as soon as you don't get a result, no one gives a and then people lose their
Yeah.
identity and they just don't know where to go. So it's like, am I really going to be that dude who's chasing a result at a local race for what, like putting time away from like my fiance, stuff like that. We want to start a family, everything like that. So it's like, or I can just spend a stupid amount of money and like stress at work. Like it's that old, like you kill yourself working just to live
Yeah.
type of deal. So like that whole perspective last year was like in my head of like, nah, I'm over like hardcore racing, just putting in the time training and everything because it's pulling away from like other things in life. And the way I like look at it is uh everyone could be super good on a bike. I'm more of the mentality of like the harder you work, the better you'll do, but they're just not willing to sacrifice. And like that's okay. It's like I'm just
Yeah.
not willing to I know what it takes to be faster. I could be way faster, but I'm not willing to sacrifice the other things for that. And that's what it is. It's like to be a world champ or something. I'm definitely not that, but like you got to sacrifice a lot, and I'm just not willing to do it. And that's totally cool. There's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that. So like
No.
a lot of people are I saw that in like I think I was giving some friends validation to that of like, hey, do you really want to be that dude who's 40 and doesn't know what to do with his life? And no shade to any people who are. But like um of just like, yeah, it's like kind of there's other things to life besides biking. It's like it's just riding a bike.
100%.
you know?
Yep. Yep. But yeah, let's talk about the Eastern Trail Divide, or the Eastern Divide Trail. It starts in Newfoundland in the far east and ends in Florida Keys, and it's like almost 6,000 miles. How the heck did this come about?
So,
You doing it?
yeah. Well, that was something that like I've always been into like FKT style rides. Just because I like the longer stuff. I like the self-supported. It's like adventurous and it gets you back to like the roots of like I always like that stuff because it's adventure, but I was racing, so like it made those adventures easier, which I'm sure like everyone can relate to. It's like, yeah, I'm doing the homework, but it allows me to play more. So those bigger rides were always cool. And the Tour Divide has come up a lot. People are like, you should do the Tour Divide, yada yada. But it's just so no, I don't want to say clapped out, but like so many people do it. They know every rock that's on the trail. It's
Yeah.
just there's not like it's very broken down in
There's
like
so much beta. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So and that's kind of the thing is like yeah, it's an adventure, but it also doesn't seem like an adventure because people know like too much about it. Um and being an East Coaster, I got a lot of like pride of like, yeah, East Coast, hell yeah. So like, and maybe that's like a New England thing too. We kind of operate on like a different realm than everybody else. But so I was like, oh, here's this route that goes through a lot of places I've already ridden, and it's like East Coast, and it's kind of not a lot of people know about it. And at the time, it was the longest route. There's another longest route that just got established this year that goes from like the West Coast to the East Coast, ends in the same spot that the Eastern Divide starts in. One of my friends, Brian Charlotte, did it and looked so sick, but I'm like, nope, those days are over. Don't. Um, so that's what was alluring about it of like, yeah, this is my playground. Like, this is a course that I can do like rough New England riding, East Coast riding, because a lot of people don't understand the challenges of the East Coast. It's way gnarlier than people think it is. Like, if you get a guy from Cali and bring him to the East Coast, they do well, don't get me wrong, but it's
Yeah.
different for sure.
Yeah.
So I was actually working for Tropicana down in Florida and just like pissed that I had to be there because it was on the weekend and it was like the job was just a show. And I was kind of chewing up time of like, all right, well, let's like plan a cool adventure, kind of making like lemonade out of lemons, right? So like I was there like, well, let's be productive. And so I was looking at like different routes and stuff. And it was actually exactly a year before I did the race. And I called my boss and I was like, hey, there's this route next year. Can I take 2 months off? I like did the math in my head. I was like, I think I can do it in 2 months, yada, yada. And he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. Like, and I don't think he understood the scope of it because it was like a year out. He's like, yeah, whatever. Okay, fine. And I know it's a give and get with my work. They've been very generous, but at the same time, it's like I do give a lot of my time too. So it
Yep.
was
Yep.
that back and forth. And then as it got closer, work was like, oh, you're going to be gone. I was like, yeah, you said it last year. So that's when it like started. That's when it like grew in my head. And then I like honed, I had a rough time of year. I wanted to start it in, sure, we can talk about like the hurricane stuff, but like, because it travels so much distance and from the most northern point of North America, or most eastern northern point of North America to the most eastern southern point, like everyone knows when they go down south it's hot, and everyone knows when they go up
Yeah.
north it's cold. So there's a huge change in weather. I'm sure your fall is beautiful also, like with the trees and the
Yep.
foliage and stuff, but it's also can be very cold and tricky and
Yep.
treacherous. So it's like, and then the summer, if you've ever been in Florida in the summer, it sucks. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
oppressive.
Yep.
So, and then like in the spring, also you're doing that same thing of like up north here, it's just pure mud or snow. So it's very unpredictable. And then that gets back kind of like Unbound, we were talking about like, well, what bike would I use? And like, how do I kind of optimize for the whole trip and yada yada. So there was a lot of like brainstorming that went into when I started, and it so happened that I started at like the perfect time. Like fate just worked out well with that. And I like no one can choose weather or anything like that. You're gonna have to
Yeah.
put up with
Yeah.
it, but you can choose a better time than uh like set yourself up for success. That's what I was
Yeah.
kind of leaning at. Yeah.
What was that like to, I mean, you had almost 1,300 miles in Canada before you even crossed back into the US. What was what was your day-to-day like during this fastest known time attempt, basically down all of the east coast of America?
So that was actually the first time that I've ever been to Canada too. So that was cool. Um, it was Canada was awesome. That whole leg of it. If I was ever to recommend a section, I always said like the New Englandy section, but I would also tie in that Canada section or Canadian section. The New Finland area was beautiful. That's like just this epic like tundra type of landscape, and I think the day to day was so cool. Like every day was a new adventure. Um,
Sure.
because it was uncharted territory, but at the same time, it was like you'd ride, and it's not like you started. It's not like, oh, I did this loop and I'm back in the same town. You never got
Yeah.
familiar with the place you were in. So every day, it was like I did this thing. I called it 5 to 9. So like I'd wake up at 5 in the morning and I'd ride till 9 at night. And at 9, I would put a hard stop on it. And then at 5 in the morning, the alarm went off. I got up and went. And that way it kept like my schedule like super consistent. Like a lot of people I think make the mistake of like pushing too far into the night. And it's like, well, then you go
Yeah.
to a store that you thought was going to be open, it's closed, and you just dug yourself a hole and your body's all out of whack because like you're falling asleep at different times and waking up at different times and the weather and this and that. It was like no matter what the weather's doing, no matter how crappy it is, like this is your schedule. I do it for
Yeah.
work every day. It's like
Yeah.
just stick to a regular schedule, which seemed like a no-brainer. So that's what it was like I'd wake up, eat some snacks, hit it hard. Uh, when I came across something, I'd make sure like I kind of had a lunch and a dinner, even though, or like a breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even though it wasn't legitimate. It was kind of like, yeah, I stopped at a gas station. That was my lunch. Like eat heavy, yada yada, kind of rules of the road. And then like made sure I ate before I went to bed, stuff like that. But it was just rip all day
Yeah.
until it was bedtime. Sleep hard, wake up, and rinse and repeat.
So I have, this is like a random logistics question, but you're up in Newfoundland. Like, do you just have some local take you to the end of the road and say, all right, we're going to start this? Or did you have somebody with you at the start and at the finish to kind of like pick you up or get you going?
Yeah. So I actually brought my fiance with me
Okay.
because she's never been to Newfoundland too. And it's actually like, if you just want to go on a vacation there, it's sick. So,
Yeah.
um, and like I was going to be leaving her for 2 months. So it was like, I think it's fair. We spend like a little bit of time like hanging out. So, and that was part of my taper was we went out, I don't know how many days in advance, but we kind of had like a little mini vacation. And even with racing, I used to like to do that a lot, is
Sure.
go out like a couple of days before, not a week before like most people do, but also not the night before because it just gives you that fudge factor of like, hey, my rim got bent in the bike bag. Like I needed,
Yeah.
like it just lowers that stress level and everything. So we went there, we kind of hung out, we saw the sights. I think it's called like the bean houses or something like that. Um, but yeah, just walked the coast, got some really good food, and enjoyed our time together. And then in the morning, she drove me to the like we checked out the lighthouse and everything where it starts, which was like a nice like hangout to begin with. And then it's like, all right, well tomorrow at this time, drop me off, and then and it also made logistics really nice too because then she could bring my bike bag and all that other like kind of specialty stuff back home, like just at like she just threw her luggage in my bike bag, which made
Sure.
life easy. Um, but like it's one less element of stress and everything. So like it just made sense to do it that way. Like go out with somebody you know. And then same at the end, she met me down in Key West, which also a good spot to have a vacation at. So like that was kind of unknown what time she would get there because like who
Yeah.
knows when I was going to finish type of deal, but like within the last week you kind of know of like well he's doing this long a days, he's going to be there at this time. So we planned for that and then we kind of had like a little vacation down there to like hang out. uh yeah, so it was nice like at the end of not being like well I got to get a taxi and I got to figure out this
Yeah.
and that. It was just yeah, like she was at the end, sweet. And I actually stayed up way too long that day because I did like a 24 or a 26 hour put, I don't know, long day
Yeah.
push to the finish. And then I stayed up till like noon that day. And then we went to the beach and I just sat in the salt water and passed out. Like, didn't even know, like, when you fall asleep and you didn't know, and you're like,
Yeah.
oh, you've been out for an hour, you know?
Yeah.
But
Well, it sounds like a fantastic adventure. One question I have before we get into some lighter stuff. Um, how have you kind of kept cycling from becoming your identity in all of this? And maybe it's just balancing work and the rest of your life with it versus being like a total full-time pro. But I think there's so many people that listen to this show that are not professionals. They love riding the bike, but it does kind of eat them up at times. And you seem to have balanced that pretty well. And you've even mentioned it a few times in reference to your Unbound win and your second place, that like this really isn't my identity. So how have you found that balance?
well, I guess I shouldn't say it's like maybe I described it easier than it was. Like it at times it definitely hasn't been a balance. Like I've hyper focused on it, but that's kind of like how I am. It's like anything worth doing is worth doing good. So if like I have
Yeah,
something that I want to do, I do give it my attention. But I can also realize that like, hey, I am diving into this. Like I'm neglecting other things because I'm putting attention at this. Um, but yeah, like I like to just I think it's that like exploration and everybody like it's beautiful out. I want to go for a bike ride. Or like I'll commute to work because it's like, well, I feel like I'm exercising and moving around. It's just good for you to move around and exercise. And so it's like, well, that's an easy instead of sitting in a van for 45 minutes commuting in, I could ride for an hour and a half and then ride
yeah,
home for an hour and a half. And it's like, that's 3 hours a day. That's a long commute. But that's also like sick base miles. And now because I'm
yeah,
fit, because of that, I can do whatever the hell else I want. So like, I think that's the thing is like, I'm really prioritizing just staying fit or like keeping up on my riding. So when a friend calls and like, hey, do you want to do this? I totally can. Like, I never want
yeah,
my fitness to be the limiting factor of why I couldn't do something. Um, So like that's where my balance is kind of like lean to now is like yesterday we hung out with the family. Like I want to go for an hour long kind of recovery ride. But I was like, let's just take the dog for a walk out in the woods and like see the trails and stuff. Like the woods are slop right now, so it's like, yeah, I went out for like an hour walk. That's
Yeah.
the same difference, you know. It's like I think people hyper focus too much on like one thing or the other, or like, oh, I gotta be just like dialed in. So like I've been like keeping it looser, but still actively like, hey, if you want to still be fast, you still got to do stuff. Like I'm not foolish to think that like, oh, I don't need to touch the bike, and because I used to be fast, I'll still be fast. It's like, nah, it's like
Sure.
it's more like a maintenance dose here and there.
Yeah.
Like I'll start hopping into like little local races and things of that nature, but for fun, like just for the excitement of riding with other people. And I never went into local races or anything ever wanting to beat anyone. It just, maybe this is ignorant to say, but like it just kind of happened.
Yeah.
Um, but like that's the thing is like I just want to be able to hang out with my friends and go for a 6 hour hike and not feel like I'm slowing anybody down, you know?
Yeah. 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 No, that's excellent. So I have, we always go with a series of fun questions at the end. We start off with what's called the gas station question, and I think you might be the expert at what we should get there. We're going to pretend that we're going on like a long bomb ride. And I usually say like 6, 7 hours, but I think if I say 6, 7 hours to you, you might like roll your eyes. So we're just going to say you and I are going on a real long one, and we're going to be out in like rural New England, and we've got to restock at like a tiny gas station. So what should we what are you going to get, I guess? And I'm really curious because you said when you watched people at Unbound XL go into the gas station, you were like, that's not going to work. So I'm curious what you recommend or what you're going to pick for yourself in this situation.
Well, even from Unbound to now, I've learned so much with that, especially on the divide. You spend 40 days on the road, you figure it out pretty quick. Um, so you and I, we're gonna walk in the door. First thing I usually go to is I get a chocolate milk and then like see what they have for real food. Breakfast sandwiches are clutch. Like a bacon, egg, and cheese on an English muffin. For the simple reason being, like, people are always like, oh, I'm going to eat pizza or this and that. It's like, well, there's no protein on it. So, like, even though it's junk food, it's one of those, like, well, what's going to sit in your gut and feel good and you can still rip after? It's like English muffin is a lot of calories and carbs, but like not as huge of a package. An egg is awesome, little vitamins, stuff like that. You get a little cheese, so easy calories. And the chocolate milk, like I said, that's 400 calories to wash it down. So you almost get like 1,000 calories just from those two things. And it's like,
Yeah.
well, that's some fuel for the mule for a little while. Water, obviously. And I kind of treat gas stations like, so, and I'm kind of spinning this off, but like, it depends on the ride or whatever. But that's what I would go for of like, oh, it's noon. We need to like have something a little more
Yeah.
sustainable.
Yep.
Um, then there's these pastries now. I don't know where they came from, but the past couple of years they've been like popping up and they're like in a cellophane wrapper. And like they have like bear claws and things of that nature. But those are like 400 calories a whack. So I'll usually like grab one of those because they're super light and fluffy and they don't take up any room. And you can like pop the container and kind of like smush it down a little bit so it doesn't take up a ton of space, or like a muffin, something like that.
Yep.
Um, but then like the Snicker almond bars also, I'll put in my pockets. And this is something that like people laugh at me, but I'm like, food goes in, food's got to go out. So I would eat that meal, lube the chain, and then go to the bathroom while I was there because it's like a controlled environment
Yep.
versus like
Yep.
an hour later, like, oh, I got lunch in me and now I got to go to the bathroom and I'm in the middle of
Yep.
nowhere. And so like I'd hit the bathroom, pound some water, and then take off with like the Snickers almond bars. They got like 9 grams of protein in them. Good carbs. And like you can kind of time it, like they come in halves. So it's like, all right, every half hour, pound on this. So like, yeah, like a breakfast, like bacon, egg, and cheese is kind of like in a chocolate milk. That's going to be Can't go wrong, no matter when. Like,
Fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah. All right, next one. Uh, are you a fan of which do you prefer, Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings. My fiance and I will fight about this, but we've talked about it, and I feel like Lord of the Rings is like that's for the boys. Harry Potter's for the girls. Type of deal. Like,
Okay.
yeah,
All right. All
yeah.
right. Okay. This is a fun question, but unique to you. Top 5 ways for you to pass time on a ride. Now, I've heard you mention like, how many goats can I count today on the ride, or how many can I do a hot dog crawl around the New England region, or let's see, donuts. Can I go find how many places have like? What are great ways for you to pass time when you're just out riding, so that it's fun and not always like nose to the grindstone?
Yeah. So those are perfect examples, but like, and I don't want this to be mistaken with everyone. Like the hot term nowadays is like ride with purpose and stuff like that. It's like just go out with like a mission of some sort of like, oh, I want to check out this town, and however I get there, I get there. Like, don't choose a path. I rarely make a route. It's just kind of always like, I know I got to head north, and then once I hit this town, kind of head over here. So if you end up on a dead end road, whatever, like kind of just riding to explore a little bit. And I know if like I got a 6 hour ride and I go 3 hours north, well, I got to kind of loop it 3 hours south, and that's gonna be there. I'm new to the Spotify game. I've been using my fiance, so that's kind of like interesting to listen to. I used to just cruise around with like an old iPod with the same 1,000 songs on it. Um, but like another fun game to play is like I do the numbers game. This is like commuting. Like an easy way to like kind of think about stuff with commuting is if I see a one on a license plate, I'm like, all right, there's a one. And then I look for a two and then a three. It gets tricky once you get into like the 20s because like they don't need to be necessarily next to each other, but like, yeah, I just try to see how high of a number I can get as like cars go by. But if you're riding a mountain bike, that game doesn't really work, you know? So just yeah, I'm always like thinking about something or like kind of my next project or like I said, I like to tinker, so I'm always like in my head like, well, what if I do this and just brainstorming or thinking about another adventure. Or a nice thing to do also is like since I like to tinker on my bikes, I'll go out for a long ride with like not a new piece of gear, but like a different setup and try to make it work or like try to make it fail of like, oh, this worked great and now I know about it. Like you got all this time to ride, test the gear you want to like ride
Yeah.
for, like just trying to make life easy. So like thinking about different things of like, well, what if I try this and what if I try this? Like just kind of, I think that's the thing that keeps my mind like rolling or occupied the whole time while I'm riding is like always try to be thinking of something next to do or like how to make an opportunity out of what like I have all this time, what should I fill it with, like thinking of something
Yeah.
to fill it with, just keeping the
Yeah.
brain rolling.
Right on. All right, last one. You've talked up the New England area and Massachusetts a lot. If people are going to come ride gravel out there, what's the best gravel ride?
Like an event or
Or just like if people are going to come ride in a region, where would you suggest? Like, where does your heart go when you have all the time you want?
so I've been really fortunate to friend a lot of people up in Vermont, and that to me has like premium gravel up there. I forget the percentage of like what their dirt roads to paved roads are, but that's just like beautiful country up there. So I'd say like anywhere in Vermont, kind of the northern side of things, and there's a little bit of flavor for everybody. Like if you really want to get out and about, like check out the Super 8 loop. There's like awesome bike packing routes through there. Um, New Hampshire has some good stuff, but you got to kind of be a little more diplomatic. Like Vermont, I feel like you can just wing it in any direction. You're going to find something cool, whether it be on the south side of the state or the north side. Maine has some really cool like backcountry stuff, but that's out there. So like if you want to go
Yeah.
bike packing, Maine's cool for that. Like just isolated, you're not going to run into anybody. You're going to see cool wildlife. New Hampshire is kind of like a blend of the two, but like northern New Hampshire is wicked cool. Ride the snowmobile trails. Like that's sweet. But I think it's depending on what you want. What's nice is like if you wanted to spend a week here, you could ride on the coast and then you could ride some of the gnarliest mountains you've ever done, or like go for a hike up in the so it's like
Sure.
that's
Yeah.
kind of the cool
Yeah.
thing about New England. It's so dynamic that you can ride on like Cape Cod and it's like sand dunes. So it's almost kind of like that Florida vibe or whatever. But like depending on the riding you want to do, you can pick a different day and kind of do all sorts of riding within a 2 hour drive from each other.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Logan Kasper, this has been fantastic. Thank you for hanging out with us today and sharing all your secrets.
I don't know if they're secrets now, but yeah.
Yeah, man. I appreciate your time. Totally. Thanks for hanging out on the pod today. Do me a huge favor, and if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who you think would enjoy it. Sharing the podcast from person to person is one of the best ways, if not the best way, to help the podcast grow, because it helps us avoid all of the chaos of the algorithm and trying to figure out what it wants to be fed. Also, if you're really enjoying the podcast, do me a favor, and if you're listening on an audio platform, please and thank you, give us a 5-star review on those platforms. And if you're on Apple Podcasts, if you could go ahead and write a review as well, that would be killer. If you're watching on YouTube, please give us a thumbs up and make sure you are subscribed and leave a comment on how the episode affected you. And you can do the same if you're listening on Spotify. Once again, I do want to steer you to that link in the description for the project I'm working on, kind of at the conflux of bikes and mental health. We have a few more weeks of crowdfunding that we are doing to maximize what we can do with that project. And if you have some spare change lying around, or you just want to help us out, please go and do so. And for all of you Silka users out there, there is a special Silka giveaway within that project right now that you can go take advantage of. Finally, thank you so much for being here today, for being a part of this community and helping to spread the gravel gospel. We got exciting things coming up in the month of June as I do some very special work with Chase Wark. But more important than any of that or anything you heard today, remember this. Remember that you are loved.